Day 6 of the Diddy trial kicked off with the usual chaos. Reporters scrambling for seats, whispers swirling about what twist might come next. But no one was ready for the shock that followed when Monique, yes, that Monique, took the stand. What had long been brushed off as a bitter Hollywood feud suddenly took center stage in a federal courtroom. The moment she started talking, everything changed. She didn't just share her story, she laid out timelines, dropped audio clips, revealed receipts, and drew a web of connections linking Diddy to Tyler Perry, Oprah Winfrey, and Bishop T.D. Jakes. The room didn't just go silent. It froze. This wasn't gossip. This was testimony that demanded to be heard. For the first time, Monique had the legal floor to speak the truth she's been hinting at for years, this time under oath. And what she revealed didn't just shift the tone of the trial, it shattered expectations. By the time Day 6 began, the courtroom gallery was overflowing. Reporters crowded the corridors, all chasing the next big headline. What none of them saw coming was Monique, an Oscar winner, comedian, and long-time Hollywood whistleblower entering quietly but with unmistakable purpose through a side door. Her presence alone changed the energy in the room. Diddy's attorneys traded quick, uneasy glances. Prosecutors suddenly looked more alert, rifling through documents with renewed focus. The atmosphere turned electric. Her name wasn't on any public witness list, but the second Monique stepped up, everything shifted. Diddy, clad in a sharp charcoal suit, stiffened noticeably. He leaned toward his lawyer, whispering confused, maybe even rattled. No cameras were allowed inside, but courtroom sketch artists captured the moment his composure cracked. A flicker in his eye, the subtle clench of his jaw. Meanwhile, Monique sat tall, her tone steady and unwavering from the very first syllable. "I was brought here to tell the truth, and that's exactly what I plan to do." Her voice didn't waver. For years, Monique had spoken out about the shadows behind Hollywood's spotlight, about the power plays, the betrayals, and the blackballing by names like Tyler Perry, Oprah Winfrey, and Lee Daniels. She was mocked, dismissed, branded as difficult. But now, under oath in a federal courtroom, those same allegations carried a very different weight. The judge allowed her to present a timeline she'd meticulously prepared, one that mapped out her first-hand experiences with the Daniels, moment by moment. And this time, no one was laughing. They called her bitter, said she was exaggerating, brushed her off as emotional. But now, under oath in a federal courtroom, those same warnings were no longer being ignored. They were being examined with gravity. The judge granted her permission to read from a detailed timeline she'd brought with her, a document outlining her interactions with the very people now orbiting the trial like scavengers. It listed dates, private meetings, hushed phone calls, broken promises, and backdoor deals dressed up as golden opportunities. Prosecutors listened closely, nodding in recognition, some already cross-referencing her statements with notes from Cassie Ventura's earlier testimony. In that moment, the trial expanded beyond Diddy. Monique's second statement wasn't directed at him, it was aimed squarely at Tyler Perry, and it hit with force. She recounted a private phone call from 2018, during which Perry allegedly admitted her blacklisting from Hollywood had been unfair. "He told me he was wrong," Monique testified. "He said he'd make a public apology." But that apology never came. Instead, according to her testimony, Perry warned that going public would create fallout for others people who, in his words, weren't ready to be exposed. When asked who Tyler Perry was protecting, Monique didn't hesitate. She turned to the jury and said plainly, "Puff, that's who he was worried about. Puff Daddy, Diddy, whatever name he's going by." A ripple of gasps swept through the courtroom. Even the prosecutors glanced at each other, visibly taken aback. This wasn't just headline fodder, it pointed to a deeper, possibly coordinated effort within the industry. Nique didn't stop there. She claimed Perry told her he couldn't speak out because too many people were bound by NDAs. Then she handed over a transcript of a recorded call, quoting Perry's own words. "There are things going on that I can't be connected to publicly. We've all seen things at Puff's parties that we're not supposed to talk about." That line, pulled from the transcript, hit like a thunderclap. The judge allowed the document into evidence, but held off on admitting the audio, pending verification. What made the moment so unsettling wasn't just the accusation, it was the stark implication that some of Hollywood's most powerful figures may have witnessed disturbing behavior and chose silence over accountability, all to protect their public image. Diddy's legal team quickly objected, calling Monique's testimony speculative. But prosecutors pushed back, and one arguing that her account shed critical light on how reputation management and a culture of silence may have shielded Diddy for years and potentially enabled ongoing abuse. Then came the moment that made the entire courtroom lean in. Nique paused, adjusted the mic, and delivered the line that would dominate headlines within the hour. "I went to one of Diddy's parties, and I left because I saw something I wasn't supposed to." She went on to describe a night in 2006 when she was invited to an exclusive gathering in Los Angeles. The invitation came from a fellow actor who pitched it as a can't-miss opportunity for networking. When she arrived at a sprawling estate in the Hollywood Hills, her phone was taken at the door by valet staff. Inside, the atmosphere was dimly lit with candles, soft R&B playing in the background, and a steady stream of guests, both men and women, being quietly led into back rooms. "I remember a woman in stilettos," she said, "and a man wearing nothing but a bathrobe." The room fell silent. What started as hearsay had just turned into first-person testimony. "I remember one of Diddy's assistants saying, 'It's all about the experience here. You're safe. Just sign the NDA, dot the line.'" That's when she left. No signature, no return visit. From that night on, things changed. Nique told the court that major roles stopped coming her way. Film festival invites vanished. A producer eventually told her she had a reputation for being difficult. But she never forgot what she saw, and she always suspected her decision to walk away had marked her as a threat. When the prosecution asked if she believed this kind of setup was typical at Diddy's events, she didn't hesitate. "I think it was a system," she said, "and when I didn't play along, I got shut out." Her account echoed chillingly similar details to those shared by Cassie Ventura and other witnesses. This wasn't just testimony, it was a pattern unfolding. Candlelit rooms, carefully staged camera setups, experiences involving hired escorts, and lavish hotels passed off as networking opportunities, these were the scenes Nique described. But what made her testimony stand apart wasn't just the lurid details. It was her perspective as a respected actress, not a mere participant. She entered on her own terms, but left with her career quietly unraveling. When the prosecution asked if she believed Tyler Perry had intentionally shielded Diddy's reputation, Nique didn't hesitate. "Yes," she replied firmly, "and I believe it was strategic, coordinated a deliberate effort to keep everything under wraps." She then referenced a now infamous moment, one that had gone viral on social media, making her words hit even harder. Tyler Perry walking into Bishop T.D. Jakes' mega church and writing $1 million check right there in front of the congregation. "People called it a blessing," Nique said, her voice steady. "But I saw it as a transaction," she continued. "That donation wasn't just charity, it was damage control. That church serves as a shield, and people like Diddy use it to forge alliances that make them seem untouchable." A ripple of murmurs spread through the courtroom. Even the judge looked up, observing as the jury scribbled down notes furiously. Nique went on to testify that around the same time Perry made his donation, rumors about Diddy and his infamous parties seemed to quietly vanish from the gossip blogs. "I knew then that people were being paid off, influenced, silenced." Nique's voice cut through the tension. That $1 million wasn't just for T.D. Jakes' church. It was for peace. It was for silence. The prosecution then presented photos from just weeks after the donation. Perry and Diddy posing together at a BET event, arms around each other, smiles wide, an image of camaraderie that seemed untouched by the swirling accusations. It painted a picture that bolstered Monique's assertion that the entertainment industry didn't just shield Diddy, it actively elevated him. At that moment, Monique paused, turning her gaze directly toward the judge. "You see," she said, "I'm not afraid of being blackballed anymore. I've been through it. And let me tell you something, silence is the most expensive price any of us pay. And we've all paid it. And this is the call," she said, her tone unwavering. "The one where Tyler Perry admitted he was wrong." The courtroom stirred, gasps, hushed voices, the sound of pens pausing mid-sentence. For years, she had spoken publicly about a private apology from Perry following the Precious controversy. Now, under oath, she wasn't just telling the story, she was backing it up. "I recorded the conversation," she stated. "He was aware, I told him, and he said he didn't mind." She handed the transcript to the bailiff, who carried it to the judge. He read the opening lines carefully, then gave a nod, allowing the prosecution to continue. According to the transcript, Perry said, "I know I messed up. You were never difficult. You just didn't want to work for free. I should have said that publicly." But then he shifted. "I can't go public," he allegedly told Monique. "Puff's name is tied up in too much right now." Prosecutors seized the moment to highlight a broader point, that even Hollywood's cleanest reputations were afraid of the domino effect that might follow if Diddy's secrets came to light. "He told me," Monique said, "that if Puff went down, a lot of people were going with him. People who fund films, people who sign the checks." This part of her testimony reinforced what others like former bodyguard Gene Deal and actor Christian Keys had only alluded to, that Diddy's influence wasn't just personal, it was systemic. As she continued, Monique's voice began to waver with emotion. "He had a chance to clear my name," Monique said, her voice firm, "but he didn't, because he was protecting something bigger than me, something darker than anyone wants to acknowledge." The judge ruled the transcript admissible, a major win for the prosecution. Across the courtroom, Diddy's legal team looked visibly rattled. What had once been written off as a private conversation was now part of the federal record. Then, Monique dropped a name that hadn't surfaced in the trial until that moment, but its impact was immediate. Oprah Winfrey. This wasn't a casual mention. Monique brought it up with purpose. "In 2010, she testified, I confided something deeply personal to Oprah, that I had been abused by my brother as a child. She promised she would never exploit that pain, but she did." The courtroom fell into a tense silence. What had started as testimony about one man was now pulling back the curtain on a much wider circle, and no one in the room could ignore it. "She put my brother on her show," Monique said, her voice tightening, "and she did it right after I declined to join the Precious press tour." The weight of her words hung in the air. The courtroom didn't quite know how to react. Some shifted in their seats. Others just sat in stunned silence. But Monique wasn't finished. "She betrayed me, and when I asked why, she said, 'It's just business.' But I knew better. They were trying to silence me." Then she pivoted, connecting Oprah, Tyler Perry, and Diddy, not just through industry circles, but through shared tactics, NDAs, crisis PR teams, and the same group of powerful handlers working behind the scenes. "They all use the same people to clean up their messes," she testified. "And I know that because one of those PR reps accidentally forwarded me an entire email chain." The implication was clear. This wasn't coincidence. It was coordination. "One email," Monique said, "with my name, Puff's name, and Tyler's name all in the subject line. The topic? Managing optics." She handed over a redacted version of the email, which the judge accepted for review. But the point didn't need further explanation. The message was loud and clear. This wasn't just about protecting Diddy, it was a coordinated effort. NDAs were signed. Money changed hands. Reputations were carefully managed. And careers? They rose or crumbled based on who was willing to play the game. Sitting under oath, Monique gave it a name. A silence machine engineered to crush anyone who dared ask questions. The jury watched as she calmly closed her binder. Her voice had stayed steady throughout. No cracks, no nerves. She didn't need to defend herself because, for the first time, she wasn't just speaking her truth. She was laying bare the system. She was under oath, and as the courtroom returned from a brief recess, Monique did something no one saw coming. She took a breath, looked straight ahead, and said calmly, "Now, let's talk about the list." Silence fell again, thick, tense. The prosecution sat forward, ready to let her speak uninterrupted. "There's a list in Hollywood," she began, "not written down, but everyone knows it's real. It's the list of people you don't call out, the untouchables. Puff was on that list. Tyler was on that list. And Oprah, she didn't just protect it, she practically built it. She explained that this list wasn't a document you could pull from a drawer. It was an unspoken rule, an invisible line that no one dared cross. And those who did, they paid for it. The moment you spoke out against one of these power players, even with evidence, you were branded. Difficult, unstable, or worse, a threat to the industry. Monique told the court she crossed that invisible line in 2010 and has been clawing her way back ever since. She didn't throw out names recklessly. She offered them as context. "Isn't it strange?" she asked the room. "How many people worked with Diddy, Tyler, and Oprah, and then vanished?" She pointed to actors who had breakout roles, award buzz, rising careers only to disappear without explanation. "Some of them didn't play the game," she said, and that, according to Monique, was all it took to end a career. "Some of them simply said no." Then Monique lowered her voice. "And some of them saw things they were never meant to see." With the court's permission, she read a brief, redacted statement from a former actor name withheld for safety, who described a secluded retreat hosted by a powerful male filmmaker. Phones were confiscated, NDAs were signed, and what followed, the actor claimed, were unsettling rituals that defied explanation. Monique never named Tyler Perry, but she didn't need to. She let the implications hang heavy in the room, the silence doing more than any accusation could. The judge stepped in to remind the courtroom that these were allegations, not proven facts, but Monique's message had already landed. Loud, clear, and impossible to ignore. "The industry wasn't protecting art," Monique said. "It was protecting secrets and punishing anyone who dared to expose them. The cost of telling the truth? According to her, your career, your reputation, your peace. They'll strip everything from you," she continued, "and leave you explaining to the world why your phone never rings again." When asked directly whether she believed Diddy had a hand in the sabotage of her career, Monique didn't flinch. "Yes," she said. "Not in the beginning, but eventually, yes. And I didn't understand just how deep it ran until years later." She went on to describe a moment after the precious fallout, when the blackballing had begun in earnest. A junior executive from Revolt TV, Diddy's media company, called her unexpectedly. "He told me, word for word, you rubbed the wrong people." And just like that, the shadow network surrounding her exile started to take shape. "It's not just about Tyler and Oprah," Monique said. "Puff doesn't like noise either." The courtroom leaned in, tension rising. Monique testified that a former executive had hinted at quiet negotiations between Tyler Perry's team, and Diddy talks about future collaborations and media partnerships. "The deal was clear," she said. "They wanted access to Puff's platforms, and I was in the way." She told the court she later learned through trusted contacts that multiple private meetings between Perry and Diddy had taken place. Her name came up in those discussions not as a creative asset, but as a liability. Then, the prosecution presented damning new evidence. Emails from a PR firm that had worked with both Revolt and Tyler Perry Studios. The emails discussed strategies for controlling public narratives around Monique and Cassie Ventura. What had once seemed like isolated silencing now looked dangerously close to a coordinated effort. For the first time, the court was presented with clear digital evidence showing both Monique's and Cassie Ventura's public images being strategically managed together. The impact was immediate. The room shifted. Monique didn't pause. She went on to explain how the label difficult wasn't just a rumor, it was a weapon. They use that word like a virus, she said. Infect one casting director with it, and it spreads. Suddenly, your name comes up in a meeting, and they've already got a reason to say no. Then came the line few in Hollywood would ever dare say, let alone under oath. I wasn't blackballed, she said. I was whiteballed. By black people. By folks who looked like me. Folks who were more afraid of losing their place than doing what was right. The courtroom fell silent, not out of shock, but because everyone understood exactly what she meant. I didn't want to be here, Monique began, her voice calm but heavy with exhaustion. But I needed to be. Because what they did to me, what they did to Cassie, what they're doing to young women and men right now, it won't stop unless someone says it louder than they can silence it. She told the court that the prosecution first reached out 2 months earlier, and at first her answer was no. I wasn't going to reopen those wounds, she said. Wasn't going to drag my family, my trauma, my pain back into the spotlight. But then, everything changed. I saw the Prince recording. I saw Diddy shouting in court. I watched Cassie break down on the stand. She paused, eyes fixed ahead. That's when something in me broke too. Monique described her decision to testify as a moment of deep spiritual clarity. I heard my grandmother's voice, she said softly. She told me, baby, don't let them write your story if you're not in the room to tell it. That's when she knew she had to show up. Her final minutes on the stand were raw and unflinching. The prosecution asked, in your opinion, Miss Jackson, what's at the heart of this entire system of silence? Monique didn't hesitate. Fear, she said. This whole industry runs on fear. Fear of losing your job. Fear of losing your next deal. Fear of becoming irrelevant. And fear of speaking the truth because people like Puff, like Tyler, and yes, even Oprah, have made it incredibly costly to do so. The courtroom was still, not because it was shocked, but because it knew she wasn't wrong. She turned to Diddy, her voice low but cutting through the tension like glass. You thought no one would speak, that your empire was built strong enough to keep everyone quiet. But now, you're the one sitting in silence, and I hope this time you finally hear us. As Monique stepped down from the stand, court reporters noted the shift. Diddy looked visibly rattled, his hands unsteady, his lawyer whispering with urgency. The gallery didn't erupt in applause. This wasn't that kind of moment, but a wave of energy swept through the room. Something had changed. Monique, silenced for over a decade, had just become the trial's clearest, loudest voice. The courtroom had been walking a razor's edge all week, but no one was prepared for what came next. Just before leaving the witness box, Monique locked eyes with the defense table and softly said the name no one had dared to speak aloud in 5 days of testimony. Tyler Perry. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't showy. It was quiet, controlled, like someone unlocking a drawer and calmly placing a loaded truth on the table. You want to talk about power? About silence? Monique said evenly. Ask Mr. Perry why I was blackballed after refusing to work for free. And then look at who stood beside him at every event. A ripple went through the gallery. A collective gasp. At first, there was confusion. Tyler Perry wasn't on trial. His name wasn't listed in any indictment. But Monique wasn't pointing at crimes. She was pointing at complicity, at culture, at the unspoken hierarchy of who gets protected and who gets punished. He never lifted a finger to help me, she said. And in that moment, the room understood. This wasn't just about one man's actions, it was about an entire system built to silence anyone who wouldn't play along. But he made the calls, she said, her voice steady. Not just to shut me out, but to make sure no one else would let me in. Ask the producers. Ask the agents. Ask Lee Daniels. I've got the call logs. She held up a folder, one that hadn't yet been entered into evidence. The defense shot up with an objection, but the damage was done. The jury had heard the names. They had seen the confidence. A man once thought to be above accountability was now center stage. And Nique wasn't done. I know who was at the parties. I know who signed the NDAs. I've watched people do it right in front of me. She paused, then added with quiet finality, I was told to stay quiet. And when I didn't, the work stopped. The calls stopped. I was told, be grateful. You're lucky to even be here. But now she was here on the stand, under oath, and she wasn't asking for permission anymore. Then she said something that stopped even the prosecution in their tracks. I have the audio, Nique said calmly. A phone call. Tyler apologizing for everything. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. He admitted he was wrong, she continued. But he wouldn't go public. He told me it would ruin everything. She stared forward, unwavering. I'm done protecting men who never protected me. That sentence landed harder than any document or photo entered into evidence that week. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about Diddy. This was about the machine that allowed him to thrive unquestioned, untouched, and unchecked. Nique hadn't just pointed to one man. She had pulled back the curtain on an entire industry. And for the first time since the trial began, the jury wasn't just looking at the defendant. They were looking at the system that kept him untouchable.